the more I read about it, the more I investigated it, the more I began to realise that, oh my God, this is a huge story. And it raised so many obvious questions about culture within these institutions that I was just hooked, and I've been following it ever since.
Next to a landmark ruling on what's been called the biggest tax heist ever, Germany's top criminal court has outlawed the controversial trading practice known as Cum-Ex.
In short, it was the world's biggest banks, brokerages, lawyers, accountants, hedge funds coming together over a decade to make billions and billions of dollars at the direct expense of taxpayers across Europe.
How much did you make from cum dividend trading? How much did you make?
I think it was in the region of 700 million, but it's hard to put a figure on it because of currency exchanges and so on.
Sanjay Shah is basically a trader who has become the poster boy for that scandal. It's hard to think of too many other traders in the history of the city who have become so rich in such a short space of time.
So at the moment my financial situation is everything is frozen, and I'm allowed money to live on. So the court in the UK has approved for me to get paid every month, living expenses, and also my legal fees, and that's it.
So Sanjay grew up in London in the 70s and 80s.
London born, London raised, son of a doctor, went to medical school himself, dropped out.
He first started off working at Merrill Lynch and then Morgan Stanley in the back offices. I think he found it quite mundane. He very much was desperate to get on the trading floor in the action.
Every morning I used to turn up to the office and see a row of sports cars parked outside. And I said to my boss, "Who drives these cars?" And he said, "The traders do on the 5th floor." So I then decided that I wanted to be one of those people.
And he eventually landed on the trading floor at Credit Suisse, which was where he first learned about dividend arbitrage trading.
He began to observe these quite complex trades that exploited taxes on dividends in a really lucrative way. Now, what he told us was, while he had done various kinds of trades trying to profit from dividend taxes up to that point, the first time he started doing Cum-Ex trades was at Rabobank on the eve of the financial crisis around 2007, 2008. I think to understand Cum-Ex, you kind of have to go back to London in the early 2000s, which was when traders in the city began to figure out how they could profit from something that's called a withholding tax.
These traders would make what is known as withholding tax applications. So they would make claims for tax refunds multiple times on dividend taxes that they only paid once.
Analogies for this that I've read are like, it's the equivalent of saying, you know, me, you, and a few other people were entitled to tax refunds because we all made a donation to charity, whereas in reality it was just me who made that donation. But through a series of kind of very complicated rapid transactions, we concealed, or we made it very difficult to tell exactly who it was that made that donation on the date that it was made. So they hand out the tax relief to a number of parties. That's what Cum-Ex is, except that it doesn't take place with charitable donations. It takes place with taxes on dividends.
This is going to be one of the watershed days in financial markets history.
The day began with the bailout, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor making it clear that the financial system is so important to our society that by saving our banks, we're saving ourselves.
During the financial crisis, however, Rabobank decided to stop doing Cum-Ex and dividend tax kind of transactions. So Sanjay was out of a job once again.
And he decided in 2009, instead of finding more work at a bank, that he would set up his own hedge fund.
I didn't want to be someone who was trying to get a job in a bank when no banks were hiring.
I I think he very much wanted to reap more awards from the trading floor than what a bank would allow.
So he set up his own fund and called it Solo Capital Partners to reflect that desire to keep all the profits for himself.
He started his fund in 2009 with just £500,000, which really wasn't much at all, but this trading strategy was so profitable that he amassed a fortune of several times that.
Within 3 or 4 years, he had turned that into a personal fortune of about $700 million.
And for about 6 years, he lived the high life. He was making hundreds of millions of pounds, as were his employees, and he eventually went over to Dubai.
And he used that fortune to buy, a 32-foot yacht. He then traded that in for a 62-foot yacht. He bought property in Hong Kong. He bought property in London. He bought property in New York, property in Dubai, where he was now based. He amassed this global property portfolio, and he amassed this huge personal fortune.
I was advised, don't leave Dubai because you will be arrested and you'll be put in pre-trial detention.
In 2016, after Sanjay had made hundreds of millions of dollars, Solo Capital Partners shut down. Around this time, investigations into CumEx trades were swirling, not just around Sanjay and Solo, but around the industry in general.
The CumEx tax fraud scheme, as has been mentioned, has cost EU countries a reported $55 billion, a huge sum of money, through complex share deals with no economic purpose other than to receive tax reimbursements from the state and no actual tax being paid. European citizens have, to put it bluntly, been robbed.
CumEx, it was always an aggressive, controversial trading strategy. But what people in the industry say is that Sanjay Shah and Solo Capital went even further.
He's accused by prosecutors of creating this network of global entities, including small US pension funds, and in one case, a Jewish school in New York, to claim refunds on taxes on behalf of them as well. So in terms of the Jewish school, that one really was audacious. The German prosecutors say he claimed to represent this school, which had tax-exempt status because of their religious status in this agreement between Germany and the US. So he claimed that they would buy German shares, and then his fund on behalf of them would claim these refunds on those taxes, apparently without their knowledge.
What German prosecutors allege is that Sanjay used this small Jewish school and its tax-exempt status to pull off about $1.1 billion of trades. This presumably delivered huge profits to Sanjay and his hedge fund Solo Capital. Sanjay is now facing a legal assault on multiple fronts, okay? He's got the Danish criminal charges which have been pressed against him. Then, more recently, prosecutors in Hamburg, Germany, have also pressed criminal charges against Sanjay.
You feel that you're being targeted individually?
Yeah, I feel I'm being targeted, and one of the reasons why is that right from the beginning, the Danish authorities accused me of fraud. Being accused of fraud means assets can be frozen by prosecutors around the world. It puts the label to me, which is unfair, and after 5 years, nothing has been proven.
There's two things. There was the legality of this and the morality of this. And for Denmark, they say that Sanjay masterminded a $2 billion fraud against their country, and that's nearly 1% of their GDP. And so the morality of this at a time when a country is reeling from financial crisis and there's mass unemployment and state funding is being squeezed across Europe, to defraud a small economy like that out of $2 billion is really quite something.
When we pushed him on the morals of this, he said himself that bankers and traders have no morals. The only thing that matters is whether you make money legally or not. All I was doing, he says, was exploiting that arbitrage the same way that traders have done down through the decades. Nothing new.
Well, yeah, the barn doors were open. They were told the barn doors were open. People were driving trucks into the barn, taking out truckloads of cash for decades. And it's their bad. There was an opportunity to be had. I'm not the only one who took that opportunity. There are many others.
So it's really important to remember that even if Sanjay is the poster boy of the Cum-Ex scandal, he's a product of an industry. He isn't the industry by himself. This was not a rogue trading strategy that Sanjay dreamed up in his flat in London. This was a trading strategy that, as we've reported and as others have reported, was signed off at the highest levels of some of the world's biggest financial institutions.
Cum-Ex investigations have really taken off in the past year. Germany now has around 1,000 suspects. They've convicted 3 former bankers. They've charged around a dozen others. 3 trials are currently underway. And it's really spread to some of the biggest institutions in Europe.
I don't know where to start with Deutsche Bank, because as Alex said, they had a downgrade at the end of last week. There are reports that Garth Ritchie and Mr. Jain, the former CEO, are under investigation now for this tax problem.
So, for example, at Deutsche Bank, 80 current and former employees are being investigated. Deutsche Bank has specifically said that it never directly participated as a short seller or a buyer in Cum-Ex deals, and it is cooperating with authorities. And in Denmark, where Sanjay Shah is under investigation, things have moved more slowly. He and others have now been charged, but as far as we know, nothing has been done to try and extradite them. He remains in Dubai, where it's very hard to extradite individuals, but this isn't the end of the story when it comes to Cum-Ex investigations. Really, we really are right at the beginning.
I got to tell you that when I believe I'm going to be clear of this soon, maybe in a year or two. When I will be back in business and I will be pursuing these types of trades.